Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Welcome to the IISS. It's great to have you all here today. It's been over 15 years since the conflict with Shabaab began. A lot has changed in that time, but the one thing that has stayed the same is that neither side can claim a victory. If the Amazon mission withdraws, as it claims to be ready to do in 2 years, most observers believe that the Somali National Army was going to have an even lower likelihood of securing that victory. And indeed, if other counterinsurgency wars all over the world have taught us anything, it's perhaps that there's no such thing as an absolute military victory in that kind of conflict. So if we can't win militarily, what can we do? Last year, our guest today, Hussein Sheikh Ali, wrote in The Guardian that we have to get ready to talk to Al-Shabaab. This is quite a rare thing to hear said aloud in international circles. And there's a lot of reasons why. It's entirely fair to ask whether the Somali people are ready to speak to Al-Shabaab, whether international powers would accept it, and indeed whether it's possible. But when it comes to knowing what's possible, Hussein Sheikh Ali really does speak from experience. As a former national security and counter-terrorism advisor to the federal government of Somalia, he has led the high-level defectors program. He was instrumental in drafting several key pieces of national security legislation, including the 2017 National Security Architecture. And now, as chair of the Hiral Institute think tank in Mogadishu, he has conducted extensive research on Al-Shabaab. And most importantly, he has had enough conversations with Al-Shabaab members to know that their motivations are not always as simple as they seem. So without further ado, I will hand over to him. Hussein, thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Good afternoon, actually. I think on the introductory, 15 years is how long Al-Shabaab has been openly active. But I think we have to go back a little bit on how long that international terror groups have been operating in Somalia. You could find roots in early 1990s when the international forces who went there for relief purposes, and especially the American forces. That is the first known Al-Qaeda linked operatives in Somalia, particularly in Mogadishu. So it's not something that is just born after 9/11. I think Somalia has experienced this in a very, very quiet, not so quiet, but quiet because of the international media and the eyes were not really paying attention. But they were very, very active. There was another group called Al-Ittihad al-Islamiyya, who were literally the predecessors of Al-Shabaab, have been active in Somalia and in the region, mainly in Ethiopia and in Kenya. And all over 90s and early 2000 Al-Ittihad, and then that's when the switch happened because the proper Al-Ittihad al-Islami have decided that they can no longer continue this path, and they have changed the path to more of a peaceful, radical in views, but more peaceful, and they changed the name. They call themselves now I'tisam, and they are very, very present in Somalia, Al-I'tisam. They dominate quite a few industries in Somalia, mainly in the business and in the education. So that sect, Salafi Jihadi, who are now not directly involved jihadism, but a lot of them actually even becoming part of the government officials and present in Somalia. And I'm giving you this background to understand Al-Shabaab, where they get, their sources when they really need a source, where they have. So originally they were the younger version of Al-Ittihad, and they actually rejected when Al-Ittisam was formed, and they said they will continue the jihad. And some of them who have even traveled to Afghanistan during the Al-Qaeda operations in Pakistan and Afghanistan. And that's the early 20s. Nobody knows the exact date that they were formed, but it's between 2001 to 2002. That's the accounts that comes is between 2001 and 2002, because there was a series of meetings that they had to form a proper jihadi linked Al-Qaeda group within Somalia. The other thing that I think you should know is during that 1990s, when Al-Ittihad was active in Somalia and East Africa, and Al-Qaeda was planning to attack the embassies of the U.S. embassies in Dar es Salaam and Nairobi. Al-Ittihad was the host for Al-Qaeda to prepare these attacks in southern Somalia. So just to look at that historic, where the first Al-Qaeda operations in maybe globally, it happened in Mogadishu in 1993, and the first spectacular attack happened in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam, but also was planned in Somalia. So that's how rooted the Somali linked global jihad is. So that's why people, when they hear Shabaab, they would think it's just a young ragtag guys who just have no experience of this business. But they proved also to outlast many of it is clients or whatever you want to call it. They have managed to rule a large chunk of a territory, and that's very exceptional for more than a decade, where they have been involved active war, and they managed to keep that territory. And although they lost quite a chunk of it, but still they moved to also build a substantial institutions, mainly on governance institutions, where they collect taxes, in the most sophisticated way, where it just started initially as the zakawat, a collection which is, you could just find any Islamic jurisprudence book how to collect and who should get it. But now what they do is they just collect any sort of tax. They collect even the goods who are coming to the country while they are still on the seas, not inland. That's how sophisticated tax collection system is. They have also justice system or courts that operates and have a higher degree of, efficiency, where people who actually even really are not so religious and not much care about the Sharia would go to the courts because of the efficiency. For example, if you have a dispute of a land dispute with someone, the only reliable court that exists in Somalia is Shabaab courts. There's so many other courts that the federal government runs, and federal member states where the regional courts. They are not reliable, and people prefer this efficient system, and they even believe it is a just system. And so Shabaab have kind of became, they proved that militarily they cannot be defeated, and they also proving that their governance functions are much more efficient and also expanding by the day. Where they were not, for example, doing last year, they were doing this year, and then next year you will expect that they will move areas they were not even present, even if they are not physically present. For example, Mogadishu, they are not physically present, but no one in Mogadishu can avoid Al-Shabaab governance system, where whether you want to go to the courts or not, if you have something, maybe some of us never go to courts because we never have disputes. But if you ever have a dispute and you are in Somalia and you don't go to them, but the other party goes to them, they will give you a call and say, come. And if you refuse, that you know that your life is going to be much harder and much riskier to be around. So nobody avoids the governance system, but also the terror, activities. Just last night, I don't know if you heard the news, they have taken over a hotel just the opposite of the Villa Somalia where the president lives for 7 hours. And that's how, present they are if and when they want. So that was just I was giving you an introductory about Al-Shabaab and who they are and their background. But I just want to now go back a little bit of the conflict, where obviously Somalia had after the collapse of the state, had gone through a civil war. A lot of actually people believe in Somalia this is just part of the civil war. It's a continuation of the civil war. People started killing each other on clan lines, but those clans were not just killing for the sake of it, but they were killing because of power. And then the religious groups came. Al-Ittihad was the first one. They were part of the contestation of this, of the power. They gave up. Shabaab came in. They continuing. So a lot of Somalis feel this is just part of the civil war going on. Well, it's it can be categorized as a civil war, with the exception of their link to the global jihad and the operations in outside of Somalia, mainly in Kenya now, very much less in other parts of the continent. But they tried in Uganda a couple of times, in Ethiopia and Djibouti, but Kenya becoming more regular. So it depends how one defines then what is going on in Somalia. There's a conflict going on. Is it a civil war? Somalis, struggling or contesting for power, or is it something beyond Somalia borders, and who I will come to that later. But I just want to now come and touch a little bit on the state building that have been going through in Somalia past 2 decades. After the collapse of the state, there was so many attempts. Somalis led many times, never materialized, never managed to come to build a government that at least those who attended the conferences have agreed on. But in year 2000, in Arte Djibouti, there was a government that we call transitional national government, where at least in terms of the clans and the representation of the civil society, they all agreed to, have a president, prime minister, and parliament, and so on and so on. That was the first attempt. They came to Mogadishu, walked on the ground, really didn't manage to take it off. But it came with a huge support of public support. One main reason was Ethiopia, who's the power of the Horn of Africa at the time, was a bit suspicious of what's going on in Arte Djibouti, because there was, when you talk about civil society, there was a lot of Islamists who also involved civil activities, and they are the most organized groups within the country. So they were part of the process, and Ethiopia, they didn't like it. So they literally, or actively sabotaged that government to take off. And then 2004, there was actually a meeting that was agreed in Khartoum that the TNG at the time should be expanded to those who were outside of the government, mainly the warlords at the time, should be included. And meeting was organized in Kenya, Eldoret, 2002, and that meeting continued until 2004. And the second government was agreed that was inclusive, both the civil society and the warlords. And 2004, that is, Ethiopia was really behind that government. And then when the Islamists realized, Abdullah Yusuf, the former president of TFG, who was a former colonel of the army, and then became a warlord, a powerful warlord, very close to Ethiopia, they felt that this guy is up to something. So they have, galvanized more fear within the community of Mogadishu, and say this guy is coming to get you. But they are the ones who are organizing, and then that's when the ICU was born. The idea, actually, the court system was a clan system that people were just using as a justice system, but it was not so political, but it was politicized when this TFG came to power, and the more militant and will have taken over. I would just want to make it pass all these stories. I want to come to AMISOM. Ethiopian forces came to support the government because of ICU have attacked Baydaba, which was the base of the government at the time. A lot of actually destructions and have taken place. The international community actually didn't have any strategy of what to do with this problem. Although at that time it was a war on terror. Bush administration was really serious about Afghanistan and Iraq, and also looking for anywhere in the world where are the terrorists. And then here we go, the Ethiopians saying, okay, we got terrorists here. So I think that is when that famous clashes happened in Somalia. And then when the Ethiopians realized, this cannot be continued, and the international community as well, I think the idea of AMISOM, that's when it was born. How to legitimize the foreign forces who became a necessity now. The international forces have to be in Somalia. Otherwise, the Somalis will bring the problem to outside. And the Ethiopian forces who didn't come through the legal ways didn't have, a lot of support of the international community, although the Americans, really never minded. But I think, so AMISOM, since 2007, 2019, they are 12 years there. On one hand, I think they have been, if you want to look at they maintained, what they have achieved is, the government have established them itself and continue to have, presence, and the jihadi groups. Actually, it wasn't only Shabaab. There was some time that the small period Hizbul Islam was also another group who were fighting the government. AMISOM managed to really expel Al-Shabaab and Hizbul Islam from the city, but also managed to liberate most of the major cities in Somalia. What they have not achieved is still almost 100% of the rural areas is controlled by Al-Shabaab, the south central of Somalia. Almost 100%. There is no two towns that you can travel on the ground if you work for government. Today, the governor of Johar, which is just less than 90 kilometers from the Mogadishu, he has to fly over. He cannot travel on the ground, and that's not the exception. Actually, that's the rule. Any other, even in the small towns, you cannot travel to each other. So that's the presence of Al-Shabaab. They control the entire territory of Somalia except big towns and cities. So this is the conflict we're talking about, where AMISOM have managed to keep alive the government, and but Shabaab have maintained and also actually lately increasing its governance. They are mastering, they are learning, and surprising us. Even the complexity of the attacks actually system. If you look at it, and you look at how the expertise and the personnel that they have, who's running this tax system, they just don't match. Guys who have maybe secondary school level and even below, who never had this sophisticated trainings, but managing to not only do it but to keep it very long time with almost zero corruption. So this is the stalemate that I was trying to give you the picture that we are in Somalia, and it looks like that the federal government of Somalia, who I think now entering its final year of its term, which is going to be an election year, we would not be expecting to any major changes to change policy or have an emphasis on dealing with Al-Shabaab. But Shabaab, luckily, what they had was they never had the problem of the terms ending. You know, they don't do democracy, so they know when the new president is coming. Even next year, when the election is happening, they can wait. They can learn how things are happening, and they can strategize how to kill time with this coming term. The first 2 years, just to frustrate them, kill them as much as you want. There's the last 2 years just to manage to maintain and get more resources. And that's how I feel that we're getting weaker, they're getting stronger. But as it told me that it is, they are getting the upper hand. They have a strategy. On the other hand, the government of Somalia don't have a strategy, and the international community never had a strategy. It was like every time, in 2007, they were just putting AMISOM. The first actually was only 700. And then if you look at the resolutions of AMISOM, every time there was an increase of number and a slight change of mandate. It started with the peacekeeping, and peacekeeping was not enough. And then they added it started, not actually peacekeeping. It started with defending the government installations. And then it was a peacekeeping and then peacemaking. And there's no peace to make because, they're not winning the war. So, what have not been then tried? In my opinion, what has never been tried, in my experience, is that there was never, a proper sit down and look the conflict as a conflict. Not there was actually sit downs, but they looked the problem as already a defined, terror, group, how to deal with this terror group. But I believe it's a much more comprehensive problem in Somalia, without dealing with a more comprehensive way where you have to link by the way, I never mentioned, there's also a Daesh group. They're not as significant as Shabaab, but they have a presence in Somalia, mainly in some part of Puntland, but also last 2-3 years they have been operating Mogadishu and surroundings. So they have potential also to make headways, and the only group who has been trying to subdue them was Al-Shabaab. No other party, even a foreign actor, have lift the finger to deal with Daesh, because they are so small. But Shabaab knows they are the real challengers, and if they don't deal with them, they could be easily replaced by Daesh. So my proposal is not actually what literally was saying about my opinion in Guardian, which is just to go and sit down with them. I don't think now they they want to sit down with us because they see themselves they are the winning party. And I don't think that is at this stage is possible. But what I think is to look the conflict as a more of a comprehensive way and look into many dimensions. One is the societal issues, which is very deeply ingrained within our systems, and we need to deal with it. Obviously, the Somalis need to deal with it, but it's a part of what is fueling the conflict, mainly related to the clan, but also some other deeply cultural issues that the Somalis need to deal with it. On the other side is the governance bit of it, which is never been improved. There was a lot of effort with the international community where they have been trying to, build and help the institutions, but that effort has been just so random, and they exist only by name. There's no one single institution that if any one of you today go would qualify them as an institution. But they have building, they have staff, there's leaders, there's every institution, but literally they are dysfunctional institutions. So that angle also needs to be part of the resolving the other angle is to also look at this insurgents groups, both Daesh and Shabaab, and not define them as we want. Actually, we need to define them as what they are, and we are not yet learn them enough and what they want and how they want to be treated, how they want to be dealt with. If I give you an example, what do I mean by that is, for example, if you talk to any Somali who's in Mogadishu streets, and they will tell you, if you ask them who's Al-Shabaab, they will just give you, oh, this terror group, they are anti-peace, because of this is a narrative that has been pushed for so many years, and it's in the street. It's just how they see it. But when you ask them much more deeper questions, then the conversation changes, and they will tell you what is not actually a terror group that's anti-peace. They will start opening up and telling you what they know about them, and so I think it's we pushed a narrative that we thought is going to help us, just demonizing them and saying that they are anti-peace, but in reality I think they are a group who are in contestation of this power in Somalia. Do we like how they do their business or how they want their governance? Absolutely no. But I think that is how we want to look at Shabaab, and maybe that's when we can get closer to reality and maybe deal with them. I will conclude. I earlier said I will come back to it on what are the conditions of talking to Al-Shabaab. I think talking to Al-Shabaab, first thing first, obviously talking is two parties, and it says it takes two to tango. And as I speak now today, I think the only serious party is Al-Shabaab. So the other party have to be also as serious as Al-Shabaab, number one. Secondly, we have to improve a lot of areas that they seem to be excelling. They're becoming as the alternative government for generally the public, which is quite strange. Generally the public don't like them, but they respect them because of what they do and how they do. So the federal government of Somalia, who's the other party, and the federal member states, have to be as effective as Shabaab is in terms of governance, and also deal with other communal issues and the societal issues. And then the third bit is, I think we would probably need, which is, I think, I have to admit, at least from the international side, there's now enough appetite from the international community to settle the conflict, but with no strategy. They're looking at it now. They're saying, okay, this is we had enough. I think this has been going, for so long, and there's so much effort, there's so much money going in, and nothing has been achieved. So there's a lot of appetite for looking at the conflict on what we are discussing today, but so far there's no strategy. Obviously, they're not the ones who are supposed to come with the strategy. It was supposed to be the government of Somalia who supposed to come with a strategy. International partners could only play a role, but that is absent. So I think I would conclude my remarks here. Hopefully we will have a better discussion.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. Please raise your hand if you have a question and wait for me to come to you, and please introduce yourself as you begin. Gentleman at the back with glasses.
Thank you. My name is Shabaab from Palma Security person in Punjab. My question is there a link between Shabaab and Ihtisam?
Ihtisam, yeah.
Thank you.
Please back. I think this is probably indirect link. They are the source. Okay, this is a personal story. My elder brother, is one of the leaders of the Salafi groups. He is those who are, they call Salafi Jadid, which means that they are not part of any jihadi group, but they are Wahhabis, as radical as Shabaab and Daesh in terms of ideology, but they never accepted the fighting. Even during Abdullah Yusuf, they would still call him as the Amir al-Mu'mineen. And my brother is the leader of that group. So one day I was in London, actually. It was sometime 2008, 9, I don't remember exactly. I was so small young kids, Somali kids, who dressed typical Salafi guys, I overheard the conversation of mentioning my brother's name, but discussing also religion. So I just, when I finished what I was doing, I just spoke to them, and I tried to, tease them, check with them how, these looking nice kids who mostly born, they were actually conversing in English. So probably they were born here and grown up here. And I asked them, what do they believe about the Sufis? So that initially they kind of, they have bad and good things, and then I keep pushing them until they say, they're not Muslims. I really pushed them hard. At the beginning they started, they're kind of. So I had that conversation with my brother. I give him a call, and I share that, experience with him, just to, give him the feeling that, he's the source of these radical groups. Obviously, he denied it. No, they don't. They're not. Sufis are good people, and we have differences, and blah blah blah. But the bottom line is, I'tisam is they involved already jihadi business. They just stopped it for maybe temporarily. But this group, Salafi Jadid, they just don't actually accept any jihad. But still, the kids who are close to him can be that radical and say some Muslims could be, apostasy or murtads. So the source of Al-Shabaab or Al-Qaeda or Daesh is a Salafi ideology. But Salafi ideology is not necessarily violent. Some of them are not, but still they can be the source. So that is probably the link that I can.
Okay, thank you. Please raise your hand, and we'll probably take two or three at once. Andrew, the gentleman back in the grey sweater, and the gentleman next to you there, in that order.
Thank you for the insights and for your thoughts on this. You've spoken quite openly before about the strategy of talking and negotiating with the terrorists or insurgency groups. And I wonder whether now, given the withdrawal potentially of Anderson, the wrap-up of the mission, the weak security sector that Somalia currently has, whether the local governance system that Al-Shabaab actually is modelling might be a way of integrating that as part of the federal state going forward, given that if the international community loses patience with the way things are going and the mission winds up, whether actually the approach that Al-Shabaab is taking, whether that integrated that as part of a new Somalia might be the way forward.
Great. So at the back.
I'm Lucian Arabin, and I work with Safer World, which is a quick comment, no question. Just say that a lot of Hussein's analysis is consistent with some research which we conducted, which I'm happy to share if you're interested. Forgive the shameless plug, but with resources which might be relevant to people. One thing that we found was that the counter-terror approach, whilst sort of blocking out consideration around peace building, also exacerbates violence and leads to suffering and hardship in Somali populations, and also fuels more violence on the part of Shabaab. And so I'm interested to know, Hussein, what do you think? Do you think that there should be any change to the way in which the militarized response to Al-Shabaab is being conducted, which might make the environment more conducive for a political engagement at some point down the line?
Great. Thank you. And Yusuf?
Yes, my name is Abdelaziz Ali Ibrahim Kaliban, former advisor of the Internal Security Ministry of Somalia and also the spokesperson of the government. I have no doubt that Al-Shabaab have infiltrated the federal government of Somalia as double agents. Such infiltration of the security sector creates a serious problems. Now, I think war on terror in Somalia is becoming never-ending project. To diminish terrorists will mean an end to the profiteering elite and the international NGOs. The reason is I'll say later if I have the opportunity to say that. My question is why we are not talking to Al-Shabaab? Al-Shabaab is already in the system. I don't know who you are trying to find out outside of the federal government of Somalia. Why we cannot talk to them directly like Afghanistan government is talking to the Taliban now? America has organized. Why not you? Why not you try to do the same job that Americans are now doing on behalf of the government of Afghanistan? Now I think what Hussein has been saying is quite clear. We have in our hands, as we have said earlier, one day we lost more than 1,567 people in one single accident in Malaysia.
Yes.
We have said one of the worst terrorist attacks in East Africa. I was there. You know, we cannot only, people are now complaining what the international community are doing in terms of combating Al-Shabaab. But if you really do that job as it is, Al-Shabaab will have gone. Now you are creating...
Can we have your question, sir? I'm sorry, we're low on time.
I'm saying to him that while we're not talking, as you have said, we
infiltration.
Thank you.
Okay. I think this suggestion of AMISOM withdrawal, I see it's just a pressure from the international community. Obviously, there's a economic, pressure from the EU, who are the, who pay much of the AMISOM forces. But I don't think the withdrawal will happen as scheduled. Yes, there was a couple of times that 1,000 each was withdrawn, but there's a 22,000, and if you say every year there's only 1,000 withdrawing, there's another 20 years to go. But even last 2 years that 2,000 have left, I think there's already enough pressure on the ground militarily, where the AMISOM and the Somali government forces are struggling to keep the ground that they were holding already. So I would not say it's a bluff, but I think it sounds and it smells like it's a pressure from the international community to put both AMISOM, African Union, as well as the federal government of Somalia to be more serious, as they're not been last years, because even within AMISOM there's an issues with the contributing countries have a problem, and I think that would be for another day to discuss. But I think AMISOM will be here a long time to come, because there's no capable local force to take over from them. Yeah. On the question of the militarized approach of the conflict, I think that's how you were putting.
I'm just asking whether a change in the securitized approach towards Al-Shabaab and the way in which the conflict is conducted, if there would be any changes that you think might make the prospects for dialogue more possible, or that might be. Are there any changes to the way in which counter-terror operations and security operations are being conducted by the West, by the federal government of Somalia and so on, which would have a constructive consequence on the conflict dynamics and on the prospects for a way out of this.
Yeah, I think, in my opinion, rhetorically, it's a more securitized and more militarized, and that's not helping at all. But I would, actually prefer to do more military and security thing on the ground without just playing the rhetoric of that you are dealing with, a terror group, a ragtag, a militia, and that you will deal with it. And that's it's a rhetoric that it's all the time is used. But I think building a capable local Somali forces, both military and other security agencies, I think is, in my opinion, prerequisite of a serious negotiations. Without that, I think it's, we can only negotiate with them maybe to surrender to them. If at this stage we, say we ask them that we want to talk to you, they will say, okay, great. How do you want to, because of only AMISOM is in between. If today AMISOM leaves, then there won't be no federal government of Somalia. Just as simple as that.
And the third question was about the infiltration of Shabaab into the existing government.
Yeah, I think that is, they're doing a great job. This is what if there is a war going on, you have to infiltrate the enemy. We're not being able to do enough. They're doing enough. So I don't think this is something that we could say it's a two parties, one party doing well and the other party is just doing bad. Yeah. So I don't think it's related to the subject at hand today.
Fair enough. I think we have time for one more round of questions. We'll have Megan, Ewan, and Nina, please. Sorry? I'm so sorry. We've got a short amount of time. We'll come back to you if there's time, but let's do this round first. Megan?
Question short.
My short as well.
And I'll try to make the answer short as well.
Yeah. So I'm interested in whether you think that perhaps there are so many different national objectives within Amazon and so many national objectives between the countries that are trying to support Somali forces that it's almost impossible to have an Amazon strategy because each country that's contributing has so many different objectives and really quite clash.
Ewan?
Ewan Grant, former UK law enforcement intelligence analyst for the ex-Soviet states. I briefly worked last year in Puntland. I walked out after a week because of the absolute shambles of the World Bank program. Nothing to do with Puntlanders or Somalis. Absolute disgrace, shambles. My question is would it be a case if meaningful negotiations took place and indeed largely succeeded, would it be a case of splitting Al-Shabaab or bringing Al-Shabaab in full? And secondly, if and when Amazon goes, who do you think will take its place? Anything military and security with the word EU attached doesn't usually work very well.
Nina?
Nina Fools, working here at the Institute on East Africa. So my question kind of ties into the one my colleague Andrew already asked, and I'm really wondering, in the past we've quite regularly seen that once the military defeats Al-Shabaab somewhere, that a few months later Al-Shabaab again can gradually move in because the government was not able to institutionalize provisions that Al-Shabaab has, as you already mentioned, about their efficiency of their courts. So I was really wondering, how is the government going to fill the power vacuum that is kind of after Al-Shabaab is defeated in the area? Like, how can the government then move in to fill that power vacuum?
Okay. I think the first question was on AMISOM. I think the AMISOM issue is a very complex issue. As I earlier mentioned, it was 700 Ugandans started, and then now we have 5 military contributing countries, as well as a lot of other African countries who contribute to the police component of AMISOM. I think mainly these 2 issues I would just answer on your question. One is more the centralized AU side of it, which is based in Addis Ababa, which is, I could say it's more or less a dysfunctional institution, AU as it is. It's just a very mega organization who is not even able to pay its bills, let alone to have a functional institutions and departments. But the other side of the issue is the contributing countries itself, which are mainly came from neighboring countries who, there's some problematic history that Somalia shares with these countries, and there's already also an existing interests, whether it's military security or even economic interests that these countries have of Somalia. So, and on the top of that, there is an issue of coordination where, more or less every commander takes orders from its capital, not Addis Ababa, where the AU headquarters is supposed to be. So I think AMISOM has a lot of issues to deal with, but they have done actually fairly good job if you look at how they help the federal government of Somalia to have a space to build its own local capabilities. But the government of Somalia have not taken advantage of that space. On the issue of who will take the AMISOM replacement, I don't know. I don't think there is an appetite of replacement. UN has been, been mentioned many years, since 2014 up to now, but I don't think the UN is ready to come to Somalia. Somalia, it's a very complicated and serious conflict going on, and I don't think the UN is willing to come. On the issue of the areas you said defeating, I think locally it's used more of a clearing, which is actually there's no defeat going on because they always vacate. When they see there's AMISOM forces coming, they vacate, and that's when the war starts. When they settle in, they start literally strangling any forces who take over from them, and then the forces have to withdraw because they close all the supply routes, and they have to start from. So that's what has been happening actually last mainly 7 years. They withdraw, the AMISOM and Somali Security Forces come in, they frustrate, and then they move back. So that's, I think, the dynamics that's been happening. So it's a strategy that Shabaab is literally dictating. So you look at the other side, that's why there's no strategy that's working militarily up to now.
Great, thank you so much. I'm afraid we are now out of time. I know that there were unanswered questions in the room, so please feel free to send us emails or come up and speak to the panel. I'm sorry, madam, that we're out of time.
But for him afterwards.
Thank you. Now, we have one event coming up next week that all of you interested in East Africa should certainly consider coming to. We have His Excellency Parfait Onanga Nyanga, the UN Special Envoy for the Horn of Africa, and His Excellency Dr. Mohamed Ali Guyo, who's the IGAD Special Envoy to Somalia, the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, which will be chaired by our colleague Andrew Chi. And finally, I want to thank you all very much for coming.
Can I just one tackle? Yes. I forgot one question which is very important. Do we need to deal with half of Al-Shabaab, or I think my preference is full, because otherwise you just continuing the conflict. If you want to end the conflict, it has to be comprehensive, and there's people who are currently talking about the idea of actually helping them to be united, not dividing them.
Thank you. And we'll finish by thanking Hussein for this wonderful talk. Thank you so much.